It started on a crisp autumn morning, when Emily found herself standing in front of an old, unmarked envelope on her doorstep. It was strange, she hadn't been expecting anything, and the envelope didn't bear any postmarks or addresses. Just her name, written in a neat, almost meticulous script on the front. She hesitated for a moment before tearing it open. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, no other contents, except for a sentence typed neatly on the top. "The sixth name is the one that will change everything." Emily froze. Her heart raced as she stared at the words, unsure of what to make of them. The sixth name. Was it a code? A clue? The message didn't make sense at first. She didn't have any immediate connections to the number 6. Yet, it felt oddly personal, like a challenge, a riddle meant for her alone. Her thoughts quickly drifted to the past. She worked as a researcher for a law firm, and her days were often spent combing through old case files, trying to piece together unsolved cases. Perhaps it was a hint related to one of those. But which one? She couldn't recall any case involving the number 6, or anything close to it. Curiosity gnawed at her, and she began searching for a pattern. The next few days were filled with digging through old records, personal notes, and even her own life, trying to find connections to the sixth name. She revisited the old cases, the forgotten files, the names she had overlooked in her routine. But the answer never came. Then, out of nowhere, a second letter arrived. This time, it was more detailed, and her pulse quickened as she read. "You're looking in the wrong place. The sixth name is part of your own story. Find it, and you will understand the truth." Emily's breath caught. This was no longer just a mystery, it was a message meant for her. The sixth name wasn't someone else's, it was hers. But how? She didn't remember any reference to a sixth name in her own life, or any significant event related to it. She began retracing the events of her childhood, family records, distant acquaintances, trying to uncover any forgotten names, any past connections she may have missed. But every door she opened led to dead ends. Then, as she sifted through an old family album, something caught her eye, a photograph taken years ago at a family reunion. It showed her with her parents and several other relatives, all smiling and gathered together. But there, at the edge of the frame, was a name she hadn't seen in years, Lily, her aunt who had disappeared when Emily was just a child. Emily had never questioned her aunt's sudden absence. Her parents never spoke about her, and her name was rarely mentioned. The only memory she had of Lily was her brief presence at that reunion, where she had seemed out of place, like she didn't belong. Was this the sixth name? As Emily dove deeper into her family's past, she uncovered a shocking secret about Lily's disappearance, one that had been carefully hidden for years. The sixth name was not just a lost relative, but someone tied to a darker history, a secret that, once revealed, would shake the foundation of Emily's own life and the people she trusted most. And as the pieces began to fall into place, Emily realized the truth was much more sinister than she had ever imagined. Emily's mind raced as the pieces of her family's hidden past began to align. Her Aunt Lily's disappearance, long dismissed as a personal matter, was no coincidence. Something far darker had been at play, and Emily was beginning to understand that her search for the sixth name was not just about uncovering her aunt's fate, it was about exposing a long-buried truth that had the power to unravel everything she thought she knew. She took the photograph with Lily in it and examined it again, carefully this time. There was something odd about it, something Emily hadn't noticed before. In the background, standing among a crowd of relatives, was a man she didn't recognize. His face was obscured, half-turned, but his eyes, they seemed too intense, too knowing. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that he had been the reason her aunt had disappeared. Determined to uncover more, she reached out to the only person who might still have answers, her grandmother, Edith, who lived in a quiet house on the outskirts of town. Emily had always avoided discussing family history with her, knowing her grandmother's sharpness could lead to uncomfortable truths. But now, she had no choice. The old house smelled of dust and old books when Emily arrived. Edith greeted her with a suspicious glance, her sharp eyes narrowing as she motioned for Emily to sit. "What brings you here, child?" she asked, her voice tinged with a coldness that matched the room. "I need to know about Lily," Emily said, her voice steady despite the unease that settled in her chest. "Why did she disappear? What happened to her?" Her grandmother stiffened, her lips tightening as if she had bitten into something bitter. For a moment, there was silence, the only sound the creaking of the old house. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, Edith stood up and walked to a small cabinet in the corner. She opened it, revealing a collection of old files, photographs, and letters, items that had clearly been hidden away for years. "Lily wasn't just your aunt," Edith said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "She was part of something much bigger. And the truth about her disappearance isn't something you're ready to hear." But Emily was ready. She could feel it in her bones. "Tell me, Grandma," Emily insisted, her voice now firm. "Tell me the truth." Edith hesitated for a moment longer, then took a deep breath. Lily had gotten involved with people who weren't what they seemed. People who had been keeping secrets for generations. "Your family isn't who you think they are, Emily. And neither are you." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She had always thought of herself as just another person, another part of the family. But now, she was questioning everything, her identity, her past, her future. Who had she been? Edith's voice trembled slightly as she continued. "You were too young to remember, but when Lily left, it wasn't because she wanted to. She was forced out. She knew too much, and they couldn't allow her to share it. They thought she would lead them straight to the truth, just like you're doing now." Emily's heart raced as she absorbed her grandmother's words. Who were these people her family had been hiding from? What truth had her aunt uncovered that was so dangerous? And why was Emily now the one being drawn into it? "Grandma, please," Emily begged. "Tell me what happened to her." Edith's face softened with regret. "She's dead, Emily. They made sure of that." The words hit Emily with the force of a freight train. She struggled to process what she had just heard, but before she could speak, Edith continued, her voice barely a whisper. "You're not safe, Emily. If they've found out you're looking into this, it's only a matter of time before they come for you too." Emily stood up, her mind racing. She couldn't let this go. She couldn't ignore the truth any longer. The sixth name, the name that had haunted her for so long, was the key to everything, and now it was clear that finding it would bring her face to face with a web of lies that reached far beyond her family. And so, she made a choice. She would uncover the truth about Lily's disappearance, no matter the cost. Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking on the edge of something dangerous. Her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind as she left the old house. "They'll come for you." She hadn't asked who they were, and she regretted it now. The vague fear in her grandmother's voice was enough to make her stomach twist with anxiety. Her next step was clear, but terrifying. She had to find out more about the man in the photograph, the one who had been standing at the edge of her family's reunion, the one who looked too familiar but whose identity was hidden in shadow. The problem was, she had no idea where to start. Her parents were no help. They had barely spoken of Lily, and whenever Emily mentioned her name, the conversation shifted quickly to safer, less troublesome topics. But she knew now that they were hiding something. Her first stop was the local library, where she had often spent hours as a child, the old dusty bookshelves offering a kind of comfort she needed now. She dug through the public records, old newspaper clippings, anything she could find about Lily. It didn't take long before she uncovered a surprising lead, a brief mention of a man named Nathaniel Carter, who had been closely associated with Lily around the time she disappeared. Nathaniel Carter. The name felt like a ghost, it resonated somewhere deep inside her, like it was a part of a story she'd never been told. The more she read, the more Emily became convinced that this man wasn't just a bystander. He was connected to her aunt's disappearance, and possibly to the secrets that had been kept hidden from her family for so long. But Nathaniel Carter wasn't easy to find. There were no recent records, no clear traces of where he had gone or what he had been involved in after Lily's disappearance. It was as though he had vanished, just like her aunt. Emily could feel her frustration building. The answers she sought were always just out of reach, slipping through her fingers like sand. That night, unable to sleep, Emily began to go over everything one more time, her grandmother's words, the photograph, the newspaper clippings, the research. And then it clicked. The sixth name wasn't just a person. It was a place. A place Emily had been to long ago, a place that had once felt like home. She had visited her aunt's house when she was young, and there had been a peculiar address written on a letter in Lily's handwriting, an address that Emily had never thought to question. 432, Willowbrook Lane. The address was burned into her mind now. Something about it felt wrong, too significant to be overlooked. It wasn't far from where her parents had lived, but it had always seemed like an afterthought, just another obscure address on a list of people and places she had never known. The next morning, Emily drove to Willowbrook Lane. The neighborhood had changed over the years, but the street still looked the same. Quiet, almost forgotten, lined with large houses that had long since fallen into disrepair. As she reached the address on the corner, she felt a chill run down her spine. The house was dilapidated, the windows boarded up, and the yard overgrown with weeds. Yet, there was something about it that felt strangely familiar. This was it, the place she had visited as a child, but now, it felt like stepping into a different world, a world of secrets and lies. Emily parked her car and walked toward the house, the sense of dread growing with each step. She hadn't been here in years, but it felt as though the house had been waiting for her. The air was thick with a stillness that unnerved her. She pushed open the rusted gate and made her way toward the front door, which creaked eerily as she turned the handle. The house smelled of dust and decay, but it was still strangely inviting, as though someone had been here recently. Inside, the walls were lined with faded photographs, old furniture covered in sheets, and dust-covered books. Emily's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that could give her a clue. It wasn't until she entered the small study that she saw it, a folder, tucked away in the far corner of the room. It was labeled, Nathaniel Carter. Her heart skipped a beat. She reached for the folder and opened it, her hands trembling. Inside were photographs of Nathaniel, younger, more vibrant, along with a series of letters and documents that seemed to detail a series of meetings, codes, and financial transactions. But it wasn't just his involvement with Lily that stood out. There were mentions of Emily's family as well, her parents, her grandparents, and her. As she skimmed through the documents, one word caught her attention, the sixth. The references were cryptic, but it was clear that this wasn't just about Lily. It was about Emily. About her family's legacy. About something much bigger than her. Suddenly, she heard footsteps from behind her. She spun around, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing in the doorway, was a man. Tall, dark-haired, and too familiar. Nathaniel Carter. Nathaniel Carter stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Emily's pulse raced, her mind spinning with the sudden appearance of the man she had been searching for, the man who held the answers to her family's most guarded secrets. He took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on hers. "I should have known you'd come here eventually," Nathaniel said, his voice calm, almost too calm for the intensity of the situation. "I didn't want this to involve you. You shouldn't be here." Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood her ground. "I've been looking for answers," she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "I know you're connected to Lily's disappearance. And I know my family's been hiding something big. I need to know what it is. Nathaniel didn't respond immediately. He walked further into the room, his eyes scanning the scattered papers and photographs on the desk. Finally, he sighed. You don't know what you're asking for, Emily. The truth is dangerous. It's not something you can just walk away from once you've found it. Then tell me. Emily demanded. Tell me what happened to Lily. Tell me what you've been hiding. He stopped, facing her now, his gaze intense. It's not just about Lily, he said quietly. It's about your family. About your bloodline. Emily's stomach lurched at the mention of her family. She had always thought she was just like any other person, a normal woman with a normal life. But the deeper she dug into her family's past, the more she realized how little she knew about who they really were. She felt as though the ground beneath her was slipping away, leaving her unsteady, uncertain of what her next step should be. Nathaniel's eyes darkened as he continued. Your family isn't what they appear to be, Emily. They've been keeping secrets for generations, and Lily, she got too close to the truth. She uncovered something that's been hidden for centuries. And that's why she had to disappear. Emily's mind raced. What truth? What is it that Lily found? What has been hidden? Nathaniel hesitated, his jaw tightening. There's a group, a network of powerful people. They've been pulling strings for generations, shaping events, manipulating history. And they've been watching your family for a long time. Emily took a step forward. Why? What does my family have to do with them? Nathaniel took a deep breath, his eyes flickering with a mixture of regret and determination. Your family, Emily, is part of something much bigger than you realize. You're connected to them, not by choice, but by blood. There's a legacy, a responsibility that goes back centuries. Your ancestors were involved in something that should have stayed buried, but now it's your turn to carry the weight. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Emily's mind couldn't quite grasp the enormity of what Nathaniel was saying. Was this some kind of conspiracy theory? Or was there a darker truth buried deep in her family's history? You're the sixth, Emily, Nathaniel continued, his voice low and intense. The sixth name. Your family has had 5 predecessors, each one carrying the burden of this secret, each one passing it on to the next. And now, it's your turn. You're the sixth. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The sixth name, she whispered. The phrase she had seen written on the paper, the phrase that had haunted her since the moment she had first read it. It was her. Nathaniel nodded slowly. You've been chosen. Your bloodline is linked to something ancient, something powerful. And now, the group that's been watching your family is closing in. They won't stop until they have what they want, until they have you. Emily's head spun. What do they want from me? What does all this mean? Nathaniel ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that seemed almost nervous. It's hard to explain. But your family was involved in an ancient order, one that protected something. A powerful secret that's been hidden for centuries, something that could change the world. Your ancestors swore an oath to protect it, and now you're the one who has to carry that burden. Why me? Emily asked, her voice shaking with a mix of disbelief and fear. Why was I chosen? Nathaniel's expression softened, his gaze filled with a sorrowful understanding. Because you're the only one left who can unlock it. You're the only one who can find it and keep it safe. But I don't want this, Emily said, her voice cracking. I don't want any part of it. Nathaniel stepped closer, his eyes pleading. I know. But this is bigger than both of us. The truth is out there, and once it's uncovered, there's no turning back. You have to make a choice, Emily. Either you find the truth and stop them, or you let it destroy everything you know. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. The weight of his words hung over her, pressing down like an unbearable burden. She felt trapped, caught between the past and the future, between a truth she wasn't ready to accept and a fate that seemed inevitable. The sixth name. Her name. In that moment, Emily realized that her search for the truth was no longer just about her family's secrets. It was about survival. Her survival. And the survival of everything she held dear. But as Nathaniel stepped back, his gaze never leaving hers, Emily knew one thing for sure: the road ahead would be far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Nathaniel's revelation about the ancient order, the secret that had been passed down through the generations, echoed in Emily's mind like a faint drumbeat, growing louder with every word he spoke. The more he revealed, the more she understood how deep and dangerous this world went, how everything she thought she knew about her family, her bloodline, her very identity, was a carefully constructed lie. And now, she was about to be dragged into it. The order, Nathaniel began, his voice dropping to a near whisper, as if the walls themselves might be listening, has been in existence for centuries. It's not something people talk about openly, not even among the members. Most of the world has forgotten about it, or, more accurately, they've been made to forget. But the truth is, the order's influence is woven into the fabric of history itself. Emily leaned forward, her curiosity overpowering her fear. What's their purpose? What are they protecting? Nathaniel hesitated, his eyes scanning the room as if trying to gauge how much to reveal. Finally, he spoke again. They are guardians of an ancient artifact, a relic that was said to hold the key to controlling untold power. Power that could change the course of humanity's future. And your family, your bloodline, Emily, has always been tied to it. The words felt like a weight on her chest. The idea that her family was linked to something so grand, so dangerous, made her feel small. A relic? What kind of power are we talking about? Nathaniel's eyes darkened, his face betraying the seriousness of what he was about to say. It's called the Obsidian Key. A key that can unlock the hidden pathways of time and space. Some say it's capable of bending the very fabric of reality itself, of controlling fate, of rewriting history. It was lost centuries ago, but your ancestors were tasked with keeping it hidden. They were protectors, guardians of a secret that could change the world forever. Emily's mind struggled to process the enormity of what Nathaniel was saying. A key to controlling time. The very thought seemed impossible. And yet, there was a sense of finality in his voice, as though he wasn't speaking of myths or legends, but of something real, something she couldn't ignore. But why would my family hide something like that? Emily asked, a hint of disbelief in her voice. Why not destroy it if it's so dangerous? Nathaniel let out a slow breath, as though he'd been waiting for this question. Because the key isn't just a weapon. It's a part of a larger truth. The Order believes that if the key is ever found by the wrong hands, it could lead to destruction, not just of the world, but of time itself. They were entrusted with protecting it, not destroying it. The idea was that one day, when the world was ready, the key would be found by the one who could use it to bring about a new era. A new era? Emily echoed, her voice shaky. That sounds impossible. How can anyone control something like that? Nathaniel gave her a long, hard look. That's why they need you. You're the sixth generation. The final link in the chain. Your family has been waiting for this moment for centuries, passing the knowledge down through each generation. And now, it's your turn to decide. Emily's heart raced as the weight of her role in this story began to settle on her. But what happens if I refuse? What happens if I don't want any part of this? Nathaniel's expression softened, but only slightly. Then they will come for you. The group that's been hunting your family for generations, they won't stop until they get what they want. And if they find the key, they won't hesitate to use it for their own purposes. Emily's mind swirled with fear, confusion, and disbelief. The idea that her family had been guarding something so powerful, so dangerous, for centuries was almost too much to bear. The thought of being caught up in this legacy, of being the one chosen to either protect or destroy it, felt like a burden too heavy to carry. But as Nathaniel's words lingered in the air, a thought crept into her mind: what if she was the key to preventing everything from falling apart? Who are they? Emily asked, her voice growing steadier with determination. Who's been hunting my family? And why now? Nathaniel hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a low voice. They call themselves the Collective. A shadow organization, made up of powerful people from every corner of the world. They've been searching for the Obsidian Key for centuries, and they've killed anyone who stood in their way. Your family was just the last obstacle. Emily's blood ran cold at the thought of an organization so vast and so powerful, working in the shadows, willing to kill for control of something as potent as the Obsidian Key. How do I stop them? Nathaniel's eyes flickered with a hint of something, perhaps regret, perhaps fear. You can't do it alone. The order has been fractured, scattered over time. There are still some who believe in protecting the key, but many others are willing to let it fall into the hands of the Collective. You'll need to find the key before they do, and that's not going to be easy. They'll stop at nothing to find it first. Emily stood up, feeling a surge of adrenaline and fear rush through her. She was no longer just a woman searching for answers. She was part of a much larger story, a story that stretched back generations, into the heart of a secret world. And whether she liked it or not, the key to her family's legacy had now become her responsibility. Where do I begin? She asked, her voice now steady with resolve. Nathaniel gave her a long look, as if measuring her resolve. First, you have to understand one thing, he said. The key isn't just an object. It's a part of you now, Emily. And it will change you. Whether you're ready for it or not. Emily nodded, a shiver running down her spine. She didn't know if she was ready. But she had no choice. The order, the key, the Collective, it was all real. And Emily had just become a part of it. Emily felt the weight of Nathaniel's words settling over her, a cold, suffocating blanket that threatened to smother her every thought. The Obsidian Key. The Collective. Her family's dark legacy. It was too much to comprehend in a single breath. But she had no choice now. There was no turning back. Nathaniel had been clear, the key was no longer just a mystery. It was her responsibility. Her bloodline had guarded it for centuries, and now it was her turn to find it and protect it, or let it fall into the wrong hands, with consequences unimaginable. But where did she begin? The search felt overwhelming, as though the key had slipped through time like a shadow, hiding in plain sight, leaving only fragments behind. How do I even start? Emily asked, her voice cracking as she turned to Nathaniel, who stood silently by the window, watching the rain splatter against the glass. His eyes were distant, as if lost in thought. First, he said, breaking the silence, you need to know that the key isn't just hidden in one place. It's fragmented. Pieces of it are scattered. The key is more than just an object, it's a concept, a map, a riddle that only the right person can solve. Your ancestors left behind clues, but they're buried, hidden within your family's history. You need to go back, to the places they lived, the things they protected, the lives they led. Emily swallowed hard. You said my family was involved in an ancient order. But they didn't leave me any kind of guide. How can I find the clues if I don't know where to look? Nathaniel turned to face her, his expression softened by the weight of the burden he had just shared. Because it's hidden in plain sight. Your family's history is all around you, Emily. Every house, every book, every letter, they've all been touched by the order. You just need to open your eyes to the connections. It's like a puzzle. And the pieces are closer than you think. She stared at him, a flicker of doubt crossing her mind. Could he be right? Could the key be right in front of her, concealed beneath layers of time and misunderstanding? Where do I start? Emily asked again, more determined this time. The first step had to come soon, or she would be lost in this dark world forever. Nathaniel nodded, pulling a worn leather-bound book from his bag. This belonged to your great-grandfather. He was the last of your family to truly understand the key's power. It's a journal of sorts, filled with notes, codes, maps. It was hidden, like everything else, until now. This will guide you. But be careful, Emily, your family didn't just guard the key, they guarded its secrets. There are people out there who will do anything to keep you from finding it. Emily reached for the book, her fingers trembling as she touched the old, cracked leather. The weight of it was symbolic. This book held the knowledge of her ancestors, the path they had once walked. She opened the cover carefully, revealing pages of handwritten notes, some in English, others in a cryptic script she couldn't immediately decipher. Where do I begin with this? She asked, scanning the first few pages that were covered in strange symbols. Look at the margins, Nathaniel said softly. Your great-grandfather wrote his thoughts in the spaces between the main text. The clues are there, hidden in plain sight. Emily flipped through the pages, each one more mysterious than the last. Maps of places she didn't recognize, names she'd never heard before, and symbols that felt both foreign and familiar. Her eyes landed on a specific set of symbols on the second-to-last page. There, next to a faded map of a city, were what appeared to be coordinates that seemed oddly familiar to her. This, she whispered, her finger tracing the marks, this looks like it could be a location. But where? Nathaniel leaned in, his expression focused. That's the first clue. These coordinates point to a place in Europe, an old estate, long abandoned, that belonged to one of your ancestors. It's a place where your great-grandfather went, where he found part of the key. If you can find it, you'll find the next piece. Emily felt her heart beat faster. I need to go there, don't I? Nathaniel nodded. It's the first step. But don't be fooled, it won't be easy. The collective knows about the estate. They've been watching it for years. You have to move quickly and quietly. The idea of traveling to Europe alone, to an estate that had been abandoned for who knows how long, felt daunting. Emily didn't even know where to begin with all the other layers of danger Nathaniel had hinted at. But one thing was clear, she had to go. She had no other choice. I'll do it, Emily said, a spark of resolve lighting in her chest. I'll go there. I'll find the next piece. Be careful, Nathaniel warned, his eyes hardening. They're always watching. And if you think you're the only one searching for the key, you're wrong. The collective's reach is everywhere. Emily stood up, clutching the journal tightly in her hands. The rain had stopped, and the silence between them was deafening. It felt like the calm before a storm, and Emily was about to walk straight into the eye of it. I'll take every precaution, she said, her voice steady now. But I need to know one thing. How do I trust you, Nathaniel? You say you want to help, but you're connected to all of this too. Are you really on my side? Nathaniel's eyes darkened, but there was a flicker of something almost like regret, in his gaze. I'm not the hero of this story, Emily. I'm just someone trying to make sure the key doesn't fall into the wrong hands. I've been on the inside, I've seen what they'll do to protect their secrets. If you want to stop them, you need to trust me. But I can't promise you that this will be easy. It's not just about finding the key. It's about surviving long enough to keep it safe. Emily nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of his words. The search was just beginning. The clues, the puzzles, the danger, it was all there, waiting for her. But she had no choice but to follow the path, wherever it led. As she left the room, the journal clutched tightly in her hands, Emily knew that she was about to embark on a journey into the heart of a shadowy world, one that had been hiding in plain sight for centuries. And whatever she found along the way, whatever truths she uncovered, she would face it head-on. For the first time in her life, Emily was no longer just a victim of her family's secrets. She was a part of the story now. And the hunt for the Obsidian Key had only just begun. Emily's journey had begun. The estate, an ancient manor tucked away in the rolling hills of Europe, was her first destination in the search for the Obsidian Key. The coordinates from her great-grandfather's journal had led her here, to this forgotten place that held the next piece of the puzzle. It felt strange, being so far from everything she knew, chasing a mystery that stretched back through generations. But as Nathaniel had warned her, she wasn't the only one looking. The collective was already here, watching from the shadows, waiting for her to make her move. The manor was isolated, its stone walls weathered by centuries of neglect. As Emily approached the crumbling gates, her mind raced with possibilities. Could the key be hidden within these walls? Or was it something deeper, buried beneath the estate, locked away in some long-forgotten vault? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. She froze, instinctively reaching for the small pistol Nathaniel had insisted she carry. The footsteps grew louder, and a figure emerged from the fog. A man, tall and cloaked in black, his face obscured by shadows. "Emily Hart," he said, his voice smooth and cold. "I was wondering when you'd show up." Her pulse quickened, and she took a step back, keeping her eyes on the man. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you want?" He smiled, a twisted, almost mocking grin. "I'm someone who's been waiting for this moment. The collective is very interested in you, Emily. In your family's history. And in the key." Emily's heart dropped. She'd known the risks, but hearing him speak of the collective made the danger all too real. "I'm not here to give you anything. Stay out of my way." The man took a step closer, his voice lowering. "You think you can stop us? You're just one person, against an entire organization. Your great-grandfather understood the power of the key. He tried to hide it, but we know better. It's only a matter of time before it's ours." The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, pressing a button that caused the iron gates to creak open. "I'll give you a choice, Emily. Join us, and you can have a place in the new world we're building. Fight us, and you'll die here, just like the rest of your ancestors." Emily's breath caught in her throat, but her resolve hardened. She couldn't back down. She couldn't let them win. "I'll never join you." With that, she turned on her heel, rushing toward the manor. She had no time to waste. The key was inside, hidden somewhere within the estate, and the collective was closing in. As she entered the decaying manor, the silence was deafening. Dust covered the old furniture, and the air was thick with the smell of rot. But Emily wasn't here for nostalgia. She was here for the key. She ran her fingers along the stone walls, searching for anything that might lead her to it. Hours passed, and still, nothing. But just as the evening sun began to set, casting long shadows across the floors, Emily stumbled upon a hidden door in the back of the library. It was narrow and almost invisible, its edges blending seamlessly with the surrounding bookshelves. She pushed against it, and it creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the dark. Without hesitation, Emily descended into the depths of the manor, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The air grew colder the deeper she went, and the walls felt closer, as though the very earth was closing in around her. At the bottom of the staircase, she found herself in a small stone chamber, the walls lined with ancient carvings that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. In the center of the room was an altar, and on that altar lay a small, obsidian object. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she approached it. The Obsidian Key. It was real. Her great-grandfather's journal had been right. She was standing in front of the thing that had been hidden for centuries. The thing that could change everything. But before she could reach for it, a voice echoed from the darkness behind her. "I knew you'd come here." The man from the gates. He stepped into the chamber, flanked by two others, all of them members of the collective. "The key is ours now, Emily. You've done your part." Fear twisted in Emily's stomach, but she refused to show weakness. She wasn't going to let them take it. She reached for the key, her fingers brushing the cold surface. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice steady but filled with defiance. "This key was never meant to be wielded by people like you." The man chuckled, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You think you can stop us? You don't even understand what it does." As he advanced, Emily grabbed the key, feeling its power surge through her. A wave of energy pulsed from the object, flooding her senses. It wasn't just a key, it was a conduit, a connection to something far beyond human comprehension. The world around her seemed to shift and warp as if the very fabric of time was bending. "No," the man shouted, but it was too late. The key had activated, and a brilliant light exploded from it, filling the chamber. The collective members recoiled, shielding their eyes, but Emily stood firm, holding the key with both hands, the light pouring through her. In that moment, she understood. The Obsidian Key was not just a relic. It was a force of nature, a power that transcended time, and it had chosen her. She wasn't just the guardian of its secrets. She was its protector, its wielder, the one who could control its destiny. The light died down, and the room fell silent. The collective members were on the floor, unconscious, the power of the key having overwhelmed them. Emily breathed heavily, her hands still gripping the key, her heart racing. For the first time, she felt truly alive, empowered, connected to something ancient and powerful. She had won. She had protected the key. But the battle wasn't over. The collective would come again. And Emily had to be ready. As she left the chamber, the key now hidden safely within her grasp, she knew this was just the beginning. The world had changed, and she was at the center of it. She was the last guardian of the Obsidian Key. And her fight had only just begun.